Hello, everyone. Welcome back to edX Pixel Expo 8th Monthly Webinar Global Webcast, August series, happening every 8th of the month. So do keep a lookout. And thank you for joining us this stunning Sunday to pre-celebrate Singapore's 56th birthday as we come together to convene and over a united cause. That is our love for the ocean and also diving. So for this particular session, I'd like to invite and also introduce our first session, which is called Pixel 101, where we are collaborating together with Wet Pixel. And here we have Adam Hanlon that will be fronting and interviewing interesting masters with regards to underwater photography. So I will not, digress any further, and I would like to pass the baton over to Adam. Adam, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Adam Hanlon. I'm the publisher and editor of Wet Pixel, which is an online community. And we're here to talk over the next few months, certainly, about some conversations with the masters of underwater photography. And I thought I might start off just by giving an overview of some ideas on how you might go about becoming a master of underwater photography. So with that in mind, I'm just going to share up some slides that I generated. And here we go. And we should have this coming up now. Forgive me. So an introduction to conversations with the masters of underwater photography. So obviously, underwater imagery, immensely powerful, immensely good, an immensely good tool for encouraging people to help conserve and protect our wonderful oceans. I thought that possibly we should discuss some of the key things I mentioned to try and make our own photography better, to enhance our abilities as photographers and to become a master. So first of all, I'm going to suggest get good at diving. Secondly, look at others' photographs. Thirdly, network with other photographers, talk to people. Be selective in what you share, show the beauty, majesty and perils of the underwater places, and try to inspire others. So to start off with getting good at diving, well, I'm certainly guilty of this. I can only manage to track one thing at once. I can't do more than one thing at once. I find it impossible. So with that in mind, I think in order to become better at underwater photography, we need to get really good at diving first. And the better we are as divers and the more automatic our responses to diving situations are, the better we're able to focus on the creative aspects of using the underwater photography tools and creating beautiful imagery. If we try and do too much, inevitably, we're not going to, some areas of performance will suffer. And obviously things like safety, our safety, and also the safety of the environment that we're diving in. With that, obviously buoyancy skills become very important, and they must be automatic. If we're thinking about them too hard, we can't use that energy bandwidth to, that thought bandwidth to then create beautiful images. For most people, the only solution, the only way to get really good at this is to spend time in the water. And whilst training is important, of course, it's very important from a safety perspective to be trained. However, qualifications and chasing qualification won't necessarily help you to become a better photographer. Really, the best thing, the way to become a better photographer is to spend time in the water. And lastly, even for those who are super experienced divers, use each and every dive as a learning experience. So don't be passive about this. Go in the water. When you come out, think about what worked, what didn't, what we could do better. So try and constantly learn. Similarly, we should dive like a photographer. So what does that mean? Well, obviously that first of all means diving with a camera, but when we're diving, we want to stop diving like a diver and start diving like a photographer. We want to go underwater to take pictures. We want to dive to take pictures. If we're simply using the camera as a tool to capture our journey from point A to point B underwater, whilst we will of course get great mementos of our dive, we're unlikely to be able to produce wonderful imagery. So diving, remember, is a means to an end. And we use it in order to capture pictures in an environment that we need to dive. And with that in mind as well, remember, it doesn't always have to be on scuba. Think about other ways of capturing pictures. We can do it on snorkel, we can snorkel, we can use pole cams at the surface. We can be standing at the surface. Underwater photography is about capturing pictures underwater. It doesn't necessarily mean we always need to be underwater. So think creatively, think out of the box, think about different ways we can achieve wonderful imagery. Similarly, in general, when we have a group of divers, many of whom possibly want to visit the whole reef, and your goal is to take photographs on it, that often is a difficult gap to bridge, and we're often better diving with other photographers. When we dive with other photographers, we tend to have similar goals, and that tends to make us more productive in the water. This is an example. This is a picture of a motorbike in the hold of the Thistlegorm in the Egyptian Red Sea. And certainly with this bike, obviously we've put a strobe in behind it to light it up, and we established all that, and then groups of photographers, were able to come down and capture very similar pictures. So although the setup time takes time, by collaborating with other photographers, we were all able to get great pictures. With that in mind, obviously, it's a really good idea to dive and travel with other photographers. I guess most of us are probably not traveling as much as we used to at the moment. But when that does change, obviously, traveling with other photographers and diving with other photographers is a really good way of improving your own ability. And we should try and choose resorts and dive operations that cater specifically for photographers. So this will help you to achieve your goals. Obviously, there's a great thing that happens when you get a group of photographers together. A, we have a lot of fun, but B, we generate this kind of creative buzz that goes amongst photographers, people sharing problems, sharing ideas, and it's a really good way of getting your creative juices and getting yourself going. Similarly, there's a vast amount of great information out there and some wonderful inspiration from other people's work. Later on, we're going to be speaking to Catherine, who has an amazing body of work, and it's always inspiring to go and see what she's been up to on social media and elsewhere, to see her imagery and to help inspire my own imagery. So I find it really, really good to go online. So browse images, look at other people's work, figure out how they got the images and possibly how you could emulate parts of the image. We don't have to copy people, we can generate our own styles, but by generating a broad base of techniques and a broad range of inspiration, we can also create a distinctive style of our own. Obviously, use every opportunity to learn about underwater image making, and possibly uniquely for the first time, we have a vast amount of information out there. Obviously, talks like this one, websites and forums, of which WetPixel is certainly one, online presentations and lectures, print media, there still is, and in fact, possibly the greatest or possibly a slightly unknown bargain to be had at the moment, secondhand books. Going on secondhand books now, underwater photography books, a lot of them now, if you go to secondhand booksellers, you can get incredible inspiration for very reasonable cost. Social media, and obviously social media is very important. Browsing social media and looking at imagery on social media is a really important thing. It's a really good way of keeping thinking like a photographer. And probably most importantly of all, although it comes last, is talking to the photographers. Spend time, interact with the photographers. And obviously talking now could be picking up the telephone and chatting, but it can also be all the various messenger apps, the various ways we can communicate now. So generally interacting with photographers is a really good way of doing it. Traveling with other photographers. So this was a workshop that we ran in Lembe in 2013, so a while ago now, and it was an incredible workshop. And in fact, during that workshop, there were 7 or 8 images that were subsequently placed in major international competition. It wasn't so much because of the success of the workshop, it was more to do with the fact that there was this tremendous buzz from all the attending photographers, and they all managed to generate this great creative feud between them. Okay. We've spoken a bit about sharing imagery, and sharing imagery I think is important. I think it's very sad if we have imagery that we don't share it. We have these wonderful media for sharing where our imagery can reach a vast audience, and that's a fantastic thing. But I think we also need to be a little bit selective in what we choose to share. Remember that building a reputation as an underwater photographer is a hard job. We have to work at it, we have to share imagery, we have to produce imagery, but it's actually very easy to lose that good reputation. So it's important that we maintain it. Remember, you're only as good as your best images. So if you're unsure about whether an image is good or not, it's probably not a great image to share unless you have a specific reason for sharing it. And remember that when we go out there, when we put our imagery out there, we serve as ambassadors for the oceans. We're portraying something that people are going to look at, and we want to do it in a positive way. Which means, of course, that if we're uncertain about a particular image, we probably shouldn't share. Remember that many of our audiences may not spend a lot of time in the sea, and they may not be aware of what behaviors underwater are normal, what animals, how animals behave underwater. So when we're sharing, it's really important that we portray behaviors that are normal. And obviously, remember those creatures that you're taking pictures of, they're your models. So we need to show them in their best light. We need to make sure that we show them as attractively and beautifully as we can. I thought I'd introduce this sort of idea with this idea of sharks. And obviously, a lot of the shark imagery that appears on the internet is as a result of shark feeds. And whilst that in itself has its own set of possible discussion points about whether shark feeds are appropriate or not, I personally feel images like this, where obviously you're showing in the action of the shark feed, albeit the actual, I don't particularly like this picture. It shows it's a documentary image. It shows what's going on, but I don't think it's a particularly fetching imagery. It's not very well composed. It shows sharks moving around, but fairly randomly. So to me, it's not a really good image. Whereas something like this, which took place on the same dive, where you've got this wonderful animal cruising fairly serenely by in the blue with a dive for scale, for me is a much more powerful image. This is what sharks are about. So when I'm taking pictures of sharks, even on shark feeds, I turn the camera away from the bait, away from the wrangler, so that I can get pictures of them moving around and doing what sharks do. And I think that's a much more powerful thing. It's all a question of turning your lens through 180 degrees, turn away from the bait crate, take pictures of animals doing what they do naturally. Pygmy seahorses, a very iconic image, a very iconic creature, sorry, on most macro photographers' wish lists. I think most people want to capture pictures of them. Wonderful little animals. They live in sea fans. The sea fans themselves have polyps. And in general, what happens is when the current is running, the sea fans, polyps are out and the sea fans feeding. Now, sometimes sea fans polyps are not out. That's just, they're not feeding at that point. There could be any number of reasons why they're not. And in general, that's not a problem, except when we share imagery of pygmy seahorses. And one thing that people do sometimes in order to, the pygmy seahorses are hard to find, and if you touch the sea fan, the polyps retract, and that can make the pygmy seahorse easier to find. So in general, I would suggest that when we share images of pygmy seahorses, we should try and show images with them when the polyps are out. And what that means, of course, that we know, therefore, that there's no way that you've touched the fan. And I think this is generally a good idea. Try not to let that question linger. Try and show people that the imagery that you're sharing is definitely in a situation where the sea fan has not been tampered with. Obviously here, macro close-up, you can see the polyps are out. And despite the fact that obviously I'm fairly close to this guy. Seahorses in general, seahorses tend to move along the bottom. They tend to curl their tails around the substrate. They're rarely in midwater. They do occur in midwater. I'm not saying they don't, but it's rare. So in general, possibly we should choose to share them within the environment and the positions that we see them normally. Again, that just avoids anyone assuming that we may have moved them in order to capture pictures. Frogfish. Wonderful, another wonderful iconic creature, again a macro creature. Frogfish yawn, and I'm sure people who peruse underwater imagery will have seen yawning frogfish. I'm sure they yawn for all sorts of reasons. We can't speak to them as to why they yawn. One thing that I know is that if I get too close to a frogfish, it will yawn, and I'm pretty sure at that point that when I get close to it, it's basically telling me, look, I've got a big mouth, go away. And what that means, of course, is that I know that their behavior when they're feeling threatened is definitely to yawn. So possibly we shouldn't share pictures of frogfish that are yawning, because that's a situation where they may be feeling threatened. We can do other things with them, like this macro study using a snoot, where I've controlled the light and a painted frogfish, and we can see its escar, its lure, its fishing rod sticking up there. It's a different take on a frogfish, or just simply share these wonderful iconic creatures. This striated frogfish moving across the seabed. This was in Puerto Galera in the Philippines, and it's just a wonderful image of a very charismatic picture, very charismatic subject. Octopus. Octopus tend to stick close to the bottom. They don't tend to occur in midwater. And when they move, they normally move with their tentacles in line with their bodies. They very rarely have tentacles waving about. There is an unfortunate trend to pick octopus up and drop them in the water column, and they parachute down, and then take pictures of them as they parachute down. Now, I personally have seen spontaneous behavior by octopus for them shooting up into the water column and then parachuting themselves back down. It does happen. The problem is that when we share pictures that look like that, other people may choose to emulate them in ways that are less scrupulous, and that's a problem. So that's why I tend to say when we're sharing pictures of octopus, show them in their natural habitat, show them where they normally are. They tend to sit close to the bottom. This coconut octopus, obviously within its shells, charismatic creature, beautiful creature, and there it's obviously behaving naturally. It's busy gathering its homes together to move on as they do, and we're showing the way it normally behaves. So when we're taking pictures underwater, remember, we have the opportunity to inspire people. We are a window into a world that very few people will actually venture into. And what we need to do with that is we need to show the beauty, majesty, and complexity of the world's underwater places. And certainly by creating imagery and sharing imagery of unique creatures, we can inspire a desire to protect and conserve those creatures amongst people that basically may not have the opportunity to visit themselves. That's a really powerful tool, and we should certainly strive to do that. These wonderful reefs in Raja Ampat, with the profusions of life and soft corals, all these wonderful creatures, these manta rays, again, actually in Raja Ampat, surrounded by life. These are images that we can share with people to inspire them. This is a sturgeon. It's a Siberian sturgeon in a freshwater lake in the UK. Very unique creature, possibly not quite as beautiful as manta rays, but its own, I think, beauty in its own way. So wonderful. We can inspire people to look after these creatures. These are very endangered, actually, so they're quite rare. Remember that humans are part of the world's ocean story. It's important we give people context. The oceans, humans have coexisted in harmony with the marine environment for centuries, and it's only relatively recently that we seem to be in great conflict with it. So showing images of the threats is important, but we should only do so if it motivates change. There is a tendency amongst photographers, I think, to capture pictures of degraded environments. And whilst I think that's important, we should show the world, the oceans as they are. I think also we should make sure that our imagery helps to motivate the change. So charismatic imagery, obviously this octopus busy stealing my lens. These are the kinds of things that can inspire change. And here we have a lemon goby inside a beer bottle. I think this was in Anilao in the Philippines. And again, this goby, in fact, they use these to breed and they lay eggs inside there. So it's a really good way of showing that actually, although it is human rubbish and arguably it shouldn't be there, that nature has adopted it and used it for its own ends. So how to become a master, just to round up. Well, the first thing is concentrate on your own diving skills. Get better at diving. The better you are at diving, the better your imagery will be. Secondly, study others' photographs. Get inspiration from the work of others. Thirdly, network with other photographers. Talk to other photographers. Interact with other photographers, be that online, be that in person, and be that by sharing dive boats with other photographers. Be selective in what you share. Choose what you share. Because you have wonderful imagery, choose the ones that you use, which will help people to understand and inspire them to conserve the world's underwater spaces. Show the beauty, majesty, and peril of underwater places. That's really important. That's our inspiration, and use it to inspire others. So thank you very much. A few thoughts there. I'll come out of this now.